I'm under RuneScape still. I still want to watch this, so we're gonna watch this really. It's only 10 minutes. It's actually not that long.
So, I'm not a banana, and that should be self-evident, but there was a lot of produce getting chucked about last week on social media. And it started off as part of a rolling controversy, and I use that word reluctantly, about Gotham Knights targeting 30 FPS on next-gen consoles, bucking a trend for higher frame rates that's basically dominated the entire cross-gen period, which is now either coming to an end or will never end depending on who you ask. Now, the vast majority of people, and especially console players, don't give much of a shit about this, but what raised eyebrows wasn't the frame rate cap as such, but Warner Brothers' explanation for it, which was a load of word salad about having fully untethered co-op in a highly detailed open world. It wasn't.
I know that many of you are wondering about the availability of a performance mode for Gotham Knights on consoles due to the types of features we have in our games, like providing fully untethered co-op experience in our highly detailed open world. It's not as straightforward as lowering the resolution and getting higher FPS. For some reason, our game does not have a performance. For this reason, our game does not have a performance/quality toggle option and will run at 30 FPS on console. Yikes.
Wasn't very convincing, but once we got our hands on all the different versions of the game, including the PC version by the way, it became apparent that the game is just very badly engineered. The 30 FPS cap is more of a stretch goal than a target, an ambitious extra that you might get if you're lucky, and indoors. And the idea that this is such a cutting edge...
So what they're saying is the game is poorly optimized, or very badly coded, very badly designed, like they didn't use the assets in the world properly, so it's even chugging on PC. Like I've heard that some people are like, yeah, dude, on my fucking 3090 at 1440p on like ultra, I get 50 to 60 FPS most of the time, and I'm happy with that. But there are certain parts later in the game where instead I'm getting almost 30 FPS. And like that's crazy. That's insane.
Next-gen experience that it can't possibly
that's on a 3090.
Any of those precious CPU cycles for something as frivolous as decent performance is, to put it plainly, not supported by the experience of actually playing the game. But I digress. Off the back of that, a couple of devs, I'm not going to name any names, responded to this controversy by criticizing the audience's expectations and also a piece of hardware that a lot of them keep buying them.
Wait, let me read the first one. I missed the first one. I wish gamers understood what 60 FPS means in terms of all the things they lose to make a game run that fast. Sure.
Raising the audience's expectations.
Like I said, there's performance modes. There's resolution scaling. There's tons
also
of things.
a piece of hardware that a lot of them.
There's like lower quality textures or disabling high res textures. Like a lot of other devs have done it, so you can do it. Anyways, especially taking into account that we have a current gen console that's not much better than the last gen one. That's actually true.
Keep buying the inconsiderate pricks, namely the Series S, the cheap and cheerful base model of Xbox, which shares most of the same hardware as its bigger brother, but nonetheless was denounced as a potato in an exchange, which is...
The Series X exists though, and Microsoft won't let you launch one without the other. The entire generation of games hamstrung by that potato. I wouldn't delete that tweet. Look, I want to show you guys something. What the fuck? He's not wrong. I think usually people who say things like this, they're like, oh, they're not that different, bro, are like console players and don't understand the difference in hardware. There's a huge jump from a fucking 1063 gig to a 2070, bro. There's a huge jump. Okay, here's the 2063 gig. I'm sorry, the 1063 gig. Which is basically the power equivalent of the GPU inside of an Xbox Series S, right? So if we go here and we scroll, pretty low. It's right around the RX 570. That's like a mid-range GPU from like, I don't know, 2015, 2016, maybe the same year. And another thing is, this is also basically roughly the GPU that the PS4 Pro is based off of. So if that doesn't tell you that it's very close to old hardware, then I don't know what will. That's a pretty big jump to make, right? So here we go, the 1063. Let's scroll to, what is it? It's roughly based off of a 2070 or RX 5700 XT. So let's just scroll until we see one of those. We're going pretty far here. Oh, okay. At the lowest end, because here we are at a 20. I don't actually see the 2070. What the fuck? Damn, is 2070 not here? I want to see the 2070 because there's no way the 2070 is stronger than the Super. So here's the 5700 XT, 210% more performance. That's pretty bad. That's a huge jump. Like, try to make something that's gonna run on something that has the power equivalent of like a 2070 or a 5700 XT. Also run on something that has 3 gigs of video memory instead of like 6 or 8, whatever it is. I can't remember. I think it's 8 off the top of my head. And just they're definitely not nearly as strong. It's a 200% performance boost. That's huge. That's a lot. Anyways, let me move this off to the side and we'll get back into this.
Since been
Let's see what else he has to
unceremoniously
say.
scrubbed from the record because the author deleted their account.
I would not
By
have
linking
deleted
the
that
two
tweet.
things, they also sort of accidentally implied that the Series S was in some way responsible for 30 FPS caps on consoles that aren't the Series S, which is obviously ludicrous, but people on the internet love getting their wires crossed, and so that became a thing too. Actually repeated by a big gaming news outlet as well. I mean, another developer claimed that the Series S is such a millstone around the neck of next-gen game development that studios have been begging Microsoft to let them drop support for it altogether, to which Microsoft presumably said something along the lines of, "Fuck off." Look, I understand what it's like to be a creative.
Look, I'm not saying that consoles need to be more like PC because I know that's not going to happen, but it's pretty simple, dude. You can just make it so that on the Series S, you can already, like, consoles already do this. They dynamically change the frame rate to hit a specific. They dynamically change the resolution to hit a specific frame rate. Like, Red Dead Redemption 2 on base PS4 is not always 1080p. Sometimes it goes all the way down to 720p to target that 30 FPS for base PS4. That's just how it goes. There's a lot of times where on PS4 Pro, you're more consistently at 900p or 1080p because the hardware is better. Just do the same thing for Series S. It won't be no 4K. You won't be gaming at 4K at 60 FPS. You won't be gaming at 1440p at 60 FPS. But I'm damn sure that little thing can get 900p 60 FPS. I'm damn sure. I'm positive. And if it's not, then also it's the optimization of the games. It's not just on the console. But the console's definitely holding shit back. Anyone who says it's not is dumb. They're stupid. Like, making something work for one hardware and that has to also work on another, and you are being bottlenecked by Microsoft and said you are not allowed to add a performance mode for one or the other. They have to have the same features and the same settings. You are being bottlenecked by the weaker. If you are not given the opportunity to change settings and alter the game's performance or the game's resolution on one version of it because you are told you cannot, you are being bottlenecked by the weaker. That's how that works. If I have a really shitty CPU and a very strong GPU, and my GPU is not getting a lot of performance because of my shitty CPU is bottlenecking my GPU. That's the real world. Get over it.
If whose work has been stifled by immovable decrees made by some prick in a suit somewhere, right? I've worked for the BBC, I get it. But this railing against the Series S leaves a bad taste in my mouth for two reasons. One is a matter of opinion, and the other is a matter of society. To address the first thing, of course, everyone's entitled to the opinion that the Series S is a potato. It's just a...
Okay, I don't think it's a potato. It's a dumb opinion to call it a potato completely. Like, it's woefully underpowered hardware compared to the Xbox Series X and the PS5. But if you made a PC of the same strength of an Xbox Series S, right, you would get pretty fine performance for the price. And you would also be able to alter fucking settings on said PC, which is something you cannot do on console, unfortunately.
Really stupid opinion. The kind of idiotic Reddit patter that frankly shouldn't be given time of day in a boardroom.
Yeah, it's not a potato.
Don't get me wrong, the experience offered by the Series S does admittedly fall short of the premium 4K 60 experience you might enjoy on Series X or PS5 or $3,000 PC.
You don't need a $3,000 PC to play at fucking 4K 60 FPS for a lot of games. But anyway,
that you're going to be paying off until the end of 2026.
I
know whereof I speak. I'm not going to bat for the Series S out of some misplaced loyalty to it as my only option. I've got everything. Playing video games has been part of my job for nearly a decade. I know and appreciate the differences between various grades of hardware. And I love speed and power as much as Jeremy Clarkson does, but sometimes even the most committed enthusiasts will tell you that all you need is for a machine to be good enough. and Series S is more than good enough. It can run Cyberpunk 2077, a notoriously taxing game, to a perfectly decent standard that's more than playable. For 250 quid, that's incredible. You'd have to spend twice that on a PC before you could run Cyberpunk like this, and you'd still get laughed at by all.
No, you wouldn't, because you could just build a PC around the same strength as the Xbox Series console and then have AMD FSR and NVIDIA NIS. There are so many features now that make this part of the argument absolutely laughable. You could probably pick up like a 6 gig 1060 and have better performance in the Xbox Series consoles for like $100 more. You could probably build a PC for like $400. 400. Right, maybe 350 if you're like super duper lucky on the used market, but $400 and have the same power as an Xbox Series console. I don't know what you're talking about.
All the obscene low follower count boys for having a tiny GPU. That's an insanely low barrier for entry for an experience which has been essentially gatekept from the vast majority of the gaming market on account of it running like dog shit on most of the consoles that are actually in the wild, namely the base PS4. So much so that CD Projekt Red have now effectively dropped support for last gen altogether, with future expansions being next gen only. Which includes the Series S, because the Series S is next gen in all the ways that count. This generation was not sold on getting more polygons on screen or rendering more particles or 8K resolution, which is 100% not on the cards. This generation, if you remember, was sold on the basis of fixing the two bottlenecks that crippled the PS4 and the Xbox One. Slow CPUs and, more crucially, archaic storage technology that games have to be designed around.
Okay, like using hard drives in the base PS4 and the base Xbox was fucking awful. It was so terrible. I know a lot of people who put in SSDs inside of their PS4s and PS4 Pros, which helped a lot. But I do think that like just designing them around hard drives, it sucks, because that is a legitimate bottleneck, because those things are going to ship with hard drives, which means now every game is going to have to be designed around hard drive first, and any SSD just happens to make the game load faster, but it's not a part of the core experience of a base PS4. And like, hard drive wasn't the only problem with the base PS4. Like, honestly, I think the CPU strength of the Xbox Series S is fine. It's just the GPU strength, the AP, the iGPU, whatever you want to call it. It's kind of weak compared to its bigger brother and its competition, the PS5. At a fraction of the price tag, that's really not a big deal, right? Sure, I do think that it's going to bottleneck the growth of development. Like, a lot of games are going to be a lot either slower to develop to optimize for the Xbox Series S, or a lot of games are going to have to make sacrifices so that the Xbox Series S can also run them in a decent enough way so that it's compatible and crossplay with the Xbox Series X, because they're technically the same console generation, right? It's not truly crossplay, it's the same console generation. But they at least did one thing right, you know? They made sure that the consoles had enough memory and enough storage, and fast storage at that, right? SSD NVMe's or M.2 SSDs or even base SSDs. All of those things are significantly better than the archaic ass, old ass hard drives that the PS4 and Xbox consoles used on launch. They were woefully underpowered as well, but we won't talk about that. What matters is just that they're making steps in the right direction without even worrying about like GPU strength.
For me, the SSD really is the key to the next generation.
This was supposed to be the next gen revolution, getting rid of loading screens, or the glorified loading screens where you're standing in a lift while the next bit of the Citadel is magicked into existence, or those bits where you have to shimmy through a narrow crack in a rock wall to give that creaking laptop hard drive time to spin up and find the assets for the next cave you want to go spelunking or whatever.
They tried very hard, I will say, with the PS4 and Xbox One. They tried very hard to mask loading times, because they understood that, damn, these loading times are getting fucking crazy. And instead of having loading screens, they tried to find very unique ways to make the game load without making you feel as if it was loading, like the bird in Guilty Gear Strive. I think that's a perfect example. The shimmying through the rocks in what is that? I think that's Tomb Raider, Mass Effect with the elevators. Like, they try very hard to like make it so you don't feel as if you're in a loading screen, but you are. It's the game loading in the assets and having to load them in so slowly because of a hard drive. Now we're not using hard drive technology anymore.
Corridors, assets that repeat themselves in the directory tree so often that the size of the game is inflated. These things are supposed to be a thing of the past, but they're not. And it's not because of the Series S, which is in this regard almost exactly the same as the Series X and pretty close to the PS5. The Series
The loading
X has
times,
better
yes.
hardware in it than most people's PCs. The idea that it's
That's cap. That, I'm calling cap on that. I knew he was going to say something fucking crazy. The most popular GPU on Steam is still the 1060 6 gig. Suck a nut. You're wrong. You're actually wrong. I'm sorry, but you're wrong. The 1060 6 gig is what is inside of most people's computers. It is the most popular GPU on Steam. No, most people's computers are not weaker than the Xbox Series. Now, I will say that a lot of CPUs, maybe a lot of hard drives, because people are stolen hard drives, you know, that's like an $80 upgrade, $70 upgrade for like a nice 1 terabyte SSD. SSD NVMe, that's $100, $120 for like a smaller one, a 512 or something like that, right? Those are upgradable parts. That is the difference between an Xbox Series S, which is going to stay lower end compared to your Xbox Series X, PS5s, or your PCs. I have a GTX 1070. What does that mean? You have a 1070 Ti. Wow, your card's really nice, dude. Nice. It's an older card, but it's a good card. Your card, let me show you for reference. Let's go ahead and pull this back up. I think it sucks. Are you trying to game at 4K? If you think it sucks, then you're going to think that this sucks even harder. The Xbox Series X, the Xbox Series S, let me go and do it. I have to put everything on low? Wow, that sucks. The GPU for the equivalent GPU for the Xbox Series S is the NVIDIA GTX 1060 3 gig. 3 gig. See, the difference between the Xbox Series S and PCs is they have like dynamic scaling and like resolution scale sliders like built in and like targeted VSync frame rate so that the game like will run at a constant 30 or a constant 60 depending on what the developers targeted with like specific settings in mind. Like, you know, if they built the game on PC, they're like, okay, we need to put textures on medium, we need to put like we need to put MXAA on like '1 instead of ×2 or ×4. We need to turn the shaders down. We need to turn the shadows up. Like they do all that, and they're like, okay, well, it's at 48 FPS. We want it at 60. We're at 1440p. Make it a static 900. Make it a static 900. When you go inside, when there's less stuff going on, less crowded, bump it up to 1440p. That 2K resolution. Inside it'll get 60. Outside it'll get 60. It'll go from 900 to 1080 to 1440. They don't design PC games most of the time like that. Is the problem. But this equivalent GPU is kind of weak. It's not awful, but it's weak. Let's scroll to your GPU for reference. Okay, so here we are. We're at the 1060 3 gig. The 1060 6 gig, by the way, is an 11% performance boost. Okay, let's move to your GPU, which is a 1070 Ti. 1070 Ti is a 69% performance increase. And guess what? If you think you could extract more juice out of that GPU, you can add a better CPU. You can add more RAM. You can add an SSD if you don't have one. You can't do that with the Xbox Series S. For the price, it being base, it's fine. You know, it's a $300 console. Like, what are you expecting for $300? That's good. But it's just, you know, it's fine. It's all good. Where's that video? Let's get that back.
somehow holding back the development of next-gen games is frankly ludicrous in a world where the most common GPU among Steam users is its rough equivalent.
Do not call the 1066 gig a rough equivalent. It is almost double the fucking performance. That is not a rough equivalent. You are wrong, and you are making shit up. The 1066 gig is not a rough equivalent because it has 3 to 4 gigs of video memory dedicated to that APU inside of the Xbox Series console. That's the difference. 3 to 4 compared to 6. That's a huge jump. That's a huge jump.
1000 series GPUs still reign supreme in the real world of PC gaming, which is distinct from the fantasy world of Reddit where everyone's got a fucking 3090. Meaning that your average Steam user is rocking hardware which is 2 and soon to be 3 generations behind, and this is before we get to the Steam Deck, which is one of the hottest pieces of kit right now. Studios are clamoring to support it because folk absolutely love it, and it's designed to run off a wee battery. It's souped up netbook hardware once again.
Okay, but here's the difference. This little console is not boasting 4K 60 FPS. It's saying, hey, we have an 800p screen. Most of your games are going to run at 1200 by 720. It's maybe roughly the strength of like a 1050 Ti or like a 1063 gig. And it has RDNA 3 architecture, so it will have a very powerful CPU. It has a very powerful CPU. It has 16 gigs of RAM built in. 4 to 6 of that is going to go towards your games. Or on RDNA 3. It's very powerful, very new, very modern AMD chipset, right? This thing's not trying to boast 4K 60. This thing is not trying to be something that it's not. That is the difference. No, that's bad. That's wrong.
Again, designed to be a low-cost box with a different use case to its larger equivalents, targeting a significantly lower screen resolution. Is that holding back game development as well?
No.
I've not seen anyone complain about.
No, it's not, because it's not boasting something that it doesn't have. And it's also not bottlenecking something that is on the same tier as the tier is it. It is not a console. It is basically a mini PC. That is the difference between the Steam Deck and the Xbox Series console. The Xbox Series S is not a fucking mini PC. It's not a laptop. It's not a netbook in a gamer's form, okay? It's a fucking console. And it's significantly weaker than its big brother. And yes, it is holding back game development. Because if Microsoft plus the Xbox Series S together are not allowing people to optimize their games and add things like performance mode, it is indeed holding back the Xbox Series X and PS5. Yes, it is. That's exactly how that works. Now, the hardware in it isn't awful. It's good enough hardware. Like he said, I will admit to that. It's good enough hardware. I don't hate it. And especially with the way that consoles perform, how consoles can dynamically scale their resolution. They always have VSync on. They're always targeting a specific FPS, right? 40 to 60. 25 to 30, 60 lock, 60 to 120, right? They're always targeting these FPS things, and the way that they work in a console is very cool. Like, they have a very good system for that. So I'm not knocking any of that, but I am saying that in a real world situation, it is significantly weaker than, first of all, the most popular GPU on Steam, which is the 1066 gig. So close your mouth. And significantly weaker than its bigger brothers that it is holding back. You're not holding back PC gaming, right? Not really. Like, games sure have to be optimized for console, but I think developers have finally figured out that they can like release the console version and then release the PC version and out all the cool sliders for you to go up to Ultra and 4K and like VSync off. So I don't think PC gaming is going to get held back. No, not at all. I hope it doesn't. I want to be right. I hope it doesn't get held back. But I do think consoles are being held back. Yes, absolutely. The Steam Deck is not the same thing. It's not on the same tier as something like a console because it's not a console.
About it, and if they did, they'd look daft. You can run Flight Simulator on that thing if you're prepared to put up with a few.
Because it's 30 FPS, 720p. It's not pretending to be a 4K gaming machine.
Compromises, just like how your average Series S owner is prepared to put up with a few compromises. A cheap and cheerful machine that's engineered to run the latest games, but on a small TV. It's a compromise, it's a concession, it's a fact of life that a lot of the audience consider it good enough.
Yeah, it is good enough.
Brings me to the other thing. There are two areas where the Series S absolutely bodies the competition: price and convenience. I'm outing myself as the sort of wank who has a Series S mounted on the wall in the bedroom just to illustrate this point, right?
It is really
this
small.
Is a cavity wall.
It is very
if I
small.
tried doing this with the PS5, I'd end up with an ensuite. The point is, the Series S is designed to fit into the lives of normal people. Normal
give them
people
that.
who don't really care about speed and power when it comes to their electronics. They just want a box they can play Battlefield or Assassin's Creed on and
But can we add a performance mode to games so that if you do want that and you bought a console, you know what? Actually, I guess, fuck it, you're on console. It's your fault. Who cares? Oh, well. If you want performance, build a PC. I guess that's what you get, right? Like, you chose to buy a PS5 or an Xbox Series console before figuring out if you were really a performance man or a convenience man. And once you picked convenience over performance, you're fucked. Build a PC. You want power? Build a PC.
Preferably a
You're
box
right.
that doesn't cost them a
He's
week's
right.
wages and doesn't look so much like a big pile of shit that they have to hide it behind a flap. For many,
My
the
PC
Series
looks
S
great.
represents an affordable entry point into
Aw,
next-gen gaming,
kitty.
something which hasn't existed for a long time. And this has to exist for a damn good reason.
It is expensive. The world is expensive. Yeah.
In case
right.
you've forgotten, the new generation of consoles launched in the middle of a crippling pandemic,
Yep,
at
he's
a
right.
time when most of the world's economies had shut themselves down. In the economic turmoil that's followed, frankly, a lot of people are going to struggle to pony up the 500 quid it takes to buy the kind of hardware that certain game devs on Twitter think is an acceptable minimum. As we know, between the cost of living crisis and the semiconductor shortage, it's been so difficult to get a hold of a PS5 for much of its lifetime that the PS4 has effectively been kept on life support as a current platform, and still vastly dwarfs the user base of any of the machines that have come after it. If anything, the Series S is actually raising the average in terms of the quality of hardware people have at home. Once again, it has the super fast NVMe storage and the robust CPU of its bigger brothers. These are the
Yeah, the loading
bottlenecks
times on
that
those things
needed to
are
be
crazy.
shifted. We just have to accept that some people can't justify a week's wages on a toy that's a bit better than the one they've already got.
true.
But a lot of people are happy to spend some money on a cheaper, more incremental upgrade because they want to keep up, but it's all they can afford. And honestly, when you're crying to Microsoft about wanting to cut support for those people on the basis
Yeah, okay, so cutting support for the Xbox Series S is crazy. That's insane. I just think that fuck, man, like I if I'm being honest, I feel bad for people that bought a Series X and a PS5 and are actually legitimately being bottlenecked by the Series S, and they are. It's not a potato, okay? It's not a piece of shit. It's just significantly weaker than its contemporaries, which is a problem. But just add a performance mode. You could have that performance mode on across all three of the platforms on PS5, Xbox Series S, and Series X. What happens is when you turn it on Series X, you go down to fucking 720p or 900p, but you hit that 60 FPS. So if you want it, you can still get it. But more than likely, those people aren't going to want that. He's right. If you bought a Series X, you just want to keep up with something that's good enough. You're going to be at 1440p, 30 FPS, and you're going to enjoy it for the most part, right? But you don't want to be 1440p, 30 FPS on an Xbox Series X. That's not what you bought that for. It's the world's most powerful gaming console. It is the strongest console to ever exist. And it is stronger than most people's PCs, legitimately, okay? Like, it's a console, and I don't really like consoles anymore. But it is stronger than, let's be real here, it's stronger than most people's fucking PCs. So let its legs fly. Let its wings fly, bro. It's a fucking, let it run. It's a powerhouse. And if it's being held back to 30 FPS because Microsoft won't allow the developers to add a performance mode to scale performance for the higher tiered consoles, it is legitimately holding back next gen. It is legitimately holding back an entire tier of consoles above it. Yes.
that you can't be arsed engineering scalability into your game to suit a range of hardware
You
requirements.
can't be arsed. They
engineering
asked. They asked if they could add a performance mode and they couldn't.
Scalability into your game to suit a range of hardware requirements, something you'd have to do for the
The
PC
market
anyway.
anyway. Yes. They asked and they were told they couldn't, and that they had to work with it the same because they were not allowed to add a setting to the PS5 version and Xbox Series X version of the game that would not be in the Xbox Series S version of the game. They asked, they tried, they wanted it. They wanted a performance mode, but they couldn't do a performance mode because it would also have to have been on the Series S. And Microsoft said no.
It just smacks of elitism. And look, this is a free market. You don't have to put your stuff on Xbox.
You don't.
If your ideas are so cutting edge that they couldn't possibly be made to work on anything less than a PS5 spec, then just do that. Nobody's stopping you. If your untethered big brain genius ideas are good enough to make people buy a new GPU, then go for it. Make that proposition. Plenty of others have. But if you can't do that because the numbers just don't work, if you artificially limit the size of your market and you find yourself having to compromise your vision in order to make the spreadsheet add up, then congratulations. You live under the yoke of capitalism just like the rest of us. Fucking grow up.
Kitty! His cat is adorable. Hey, why are you flipping off your cat, man? His cat is adorable.
I've been Jim Tranker for VG247,
I love his cat.
and you should definitely.
That was a nice little video. It was definitely an opinion piece. It was definitely an opinion piece for sure. I'll give it that. There was some things he said that I agree with. There's some things he said that I disagree with. I don't think that the 1066 gig is even close to performance of a 1063 gig. They're very different. They're very much so different. But in a world where console can do so many more things when it comes to actual like scaling and frame rate limiting and like resolution scale and VSync, and it like locks itself in on those things, and it has like different technologies that most modern PCs don't have, that they don't build into the PC versions of games, even though they have to do it for console. Weird. Anyways, because they don't do that, it's probably a fun console, right? I do think that it's significantly weaker than the Series X and the PS5, but it is good enough, right? I think that if you bought 1063 gig or 1066 gig right now, you built a PC around it with like a Ryzen 7 2700 or a Ryzen 7 3700X, you went all used, and you spent like $450 on a PC, $400 on a PC, and you made it roughly the equivalent of the Xbox Series X. I mean, the S, not X. Whoa, you wouldn't be able to do that for $400. And you made it roughly the equivalent of the Xbox Series S. You'd have a good time gaming. And you wouldn't have to deal with the hurdles and boundaries of console limitations and PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live. Just saying, just throwing that out there. I literally don't have my PlayStation Plus anymore. My PlayStation's in the living room waiting for someone to buy it. I got like 3 people that want to buy it, but they keep not buying it, so it's fine. But I literally don't want a console. I don't want a console anymore. I don't care how powerful the new consoles are. What I want to do is just upgrade my PC to be as powerful as the new consoles, so that I don't get left behind. And I can still scale my resolution the way I want. I can still change my settings with my cool little PC sliders the way I want. If you want performance, he's probably right. Go build yourself a nice PC. If you want convenience, if you want something that's going to fit into your everyday life, there's nothing wrong with console. If you're fine with the premium of paying a little bit less at the beginning, and then over that 7-year gap, paying the rest over time with something like PlayStation Plus or Xbox Live, and you get like little goodies for it, like new game releases or Xbox Game Pass, which you can get on PC anyway, then hey, if that's what suits you and is comfortable for you, then do it. But if you want performance, I'm going to say this now. The Xbox Series S is not it, and the Xbox Series X is going to be held back by the S and Microsoft not allowing them to add settings to the X that aren't on the S. So, no resolution scale sliders, no performance modes that don't already exist in the S version. This was a cool little video, though. I dig it. I like when people have opinions that like are opposite of mine, because I have to get very passionate about how I feel, which is funny because, years ago I'd have been like, console's the wave, bro. Console's way simpler. It's easier. There's no reason to buy a PC. Like, it's cheaper. It's more convenient, and it's simpler, right? Like, there's so many upsides to console. And I realized that those upsides are not always worth the cost of admission.